All right, so at this stage now, we're going to be looking at how you set up the lines tab and all the various tabs up top here. Starting with the lines tab, we're now setting up the layer part of it. So, did we create a layer for dimension? And in so doing, did we assign a color for dimension? Did we assign a line type? Did we assign a line width? And if those answers are yes, then all we need to come here is and choose is by layer. So we are saying when we insert the dimension, let it take on the color of the layer that it is inserted on. Let it take on the line type. Let it take on the line weight. So by layer for the three of them is basically saying when you insert this dimension in the drawing, any layer that is set current, take on its color, take on its line type, take on its line weight. That's what by layer means. Okay? So rather than coming here and trying to find a color to look like a Christmas tree, and then when you print the thing, it's still going to be in one color. So if you notice, the preview is updated because I set my dimension layer current, it is showing the green. If I was still in my text layer, I would be seeing yellow because it is showing the properties of the layer. But it doesn't matter if I'm in the wrong layer. What matters is when it's time to insert the dimension. At that point in time, I would set my dimension layer current. But I just like to practice good form. So I just went ahead and set my dimension layer current from the beginning. And then I don't want to remember later on when it's time to insert my dimension. All right, cool. So I've decided that I want to do that. But likewise, even for my extension layers, I'm going to do the same thing. So by layer, by layer, by layer, and by layer. So you notice the extension lines are also taking on the effect of that. So the same thing I did for my dimension lines, I am also doing them for my extension lines, where it comes on to the color, line type, and line weight. All right, let's continue with the dimension lines up top. If you notice, up here, it wants to know if I want to extend my dimension line beyond the tick. Well, in this case, we are not using tick, we are using arrowheads. But to change it to tick, which is what we are going to use, you would go to symbols and arrows. Let me just jump across to show you this. If I change the arrowhead from arrows, which is closed field, to architectural tick, notice in the preview, everything updates. So this is what it was talking about. I'll come back and explain that further later on, but let's go back to line tab. So it wants to know if I want to extend the thing beyond the tick. Now notice, I can change it. And as I increase the value, the line is going longer. It's too, let me just make it long, big so you can see. Let me put all 5. You see? Or it extend. Anyway, I don't want it to extend, so I'm going to put it back to 0. Whether it is arrow or not. But look at the disadvantage that you have. Well, it's not a disadvantage. I would call it advantage. If I go to symbols and arrow and put it to arrowhead, closed field, you realize that you can't change it, it gray out. Because of course, if you are using arrows and you draw your extension line like this, and then you're going to have, all right, let me not use that symbol, and then you're going to use arrows. Wouldn't your arrows terminate there? Your arrows would not be doing this. And that is why this can't change, because the arrowhead is going to terminate at 0 where the line is. And that is why you can't do that, because you wouldn't see anybody do this. You would see a person doing this. But for the architectural tick now, when it is a line, you can actually have it pushing past the line, which is what we saw earlier. But I'm just saying whether it is arrowhead or not, leave it at 0. So I don't want it to go beyond. So we are going to use architectural tick. So when I get back to symbols and arrow, I'll change it back to architectural tick. But I'm just demonstrating why the 0 can't change, because it's an arrowhead. All right. So let me clear that. All right. So if I move to the next one now, baseline. Now, baseline is when you have more than one rows of dimension. So, for example, you have, in our drawing, we have 3 rows of dimension. So we have the first row, and we have the second row, and we have the third row. 3 rows of dimension. Now, the baseline represents the distance apart. How far apart? So this is line 1, this is line 2, and this is also line 3. Baseline represent the distance apart. So in our drawing, we're going to say, you know what? We're going to make it about 12 millimeter apart. Remember, now we're talking about on paper. So all the measurements that you're going to be using here, because it is annotative, it's on paper. So that it will not be 12 on screen, because that 12 is going to multiply by 50. So it's actually going to be 600. All right? So if you look on the shared screen handout, you'll realize that it didn't say 600. It says 12. So all of these measurements is what it will be on paper when it is printed. But it's going to multiply by plot scale, which is on screen. It won't be 12, it will be 600. So let's go back to the drawing. All right. So here we're going to put 12. So here we put 12. All right. So baseline mean distance between the dimension lines. So 12 millimeter on paper will be 600 on screen. Now the option to suppress, we're not going to suppress, because all you're doing when you suppress is turning off. So of course we're not suppressing either dimension or extension line. So forget about these. That's when if you don't want to display them. There are reasons for that, but we won't go into that. All right. So we finish with the dimension line part of the setup. Let's see if we can finish up with the extension line part, which would be these lines. All right. Now, normally, we don't want our extension line to touch the drawing. So for that reason, down here, it says offset from origin. And you realize how close it was when we tried to dimension the drawing earlier. And that is because it is point something. It's very close. We are going to say, no, put it 4 millimeters. And when we click floor 4 and click somewhere else, notice how it move away from the drawing. So this is why I was saying that when you're doing manual drawing, you don't decide to give a little gap and just click and draw your line. But in this software, you have to tell how much it should be so it appears on screen likewise. You follow? So the other one now is saying, if you want to extend your extension line beyond the dimension line, it's talking about this part here. So the dimension line here, it wants to know how, if you want to extend it, how far. Again, we're going to, yes.
Is 4 millimeters a standard offset?
It could be 3, it could be 4, as long as it's, I just work with 4. It could be 3 too, as long as it's enough away. Right? So I just use what is on the standard. So use what is on the standard, because when I'm marking, I expect everybody to have the same measurement. Because if I allow you, then some people go and put 2, some put 3, some put 5, and it's all over the place. So when you give a standard, what you are doing is working for consistency. So when I'm marking down, I have grounds to mark it down. If I don't set no standard, then anybody can put anything and I can mark them down. You follow? So I want consistency. So again, I'm going to work with 4 for this one. So if I put here, notice it extends beyond by 4 millimeters. That's what that is doing. Again, if it was manual drawing, you just draw your line and go stop it somewhere. But in this software, you're going to have to set that. Now down here, I'm not going to trouble this feature just yet. I'll leave it alone. So even though on the standard I have something, I'm going to let you see the effect of not using it, and then you'll appreciate it. So I'm going to skip it for now, but I'm going to come back to it. at an appropriate time. It's going to be very appropriate when I come back for it. So this time around, I'm jumping over to the symbols and arrows tab. So in the presentation, that would have been the next screen, the symbols and arrows. So again, all the settings are there. All I'm doing is just going through them with you, but I've already set them up. Okay, so back to AutoCAD. All right, so this time around, we're going to choose architectural tick. We don't want the arrowheads. Arrowheads are mainly used in mechanical drawing, not in architectural drawing. Can you imagine how long it would take us to draw the arrows in one by one if we were doing manual drawing? So architectural is much faster. So we use the architectural tick. There are others in there as well. See, there's oblique that looks similar. It's just that the line weight of architectural tick is a little heavier. So I'm using the architectural tick. So it looks a little thicker, broader. All right, and if you change first, the second one will change. But if you change this one first, then you have to go back and change this one. So the smartest thing to do is to change this one, and the other one will change along with it if you do it the first time. But if you have two different ones, of course, if you change one, you're going to have to change the other one. But if you have two of them, you don't need to change this and then change. Just change the first one, and the second will automatically follow the first. Now, I'm not changing the leader, because this is if you want an arrow to point on something. Although we're not going to use this, we're going to use multi-leader. So I'll just leave that. The arrow size on the handout are 3mm, but it's not arrows we're using now, it's the architectural tick. So what it is doing is making this a little longer, you know. I'm just using what I have on there. Let me just double check to see. Yes, it's 3 I have, so I'm putting back 3. All right, good. So that one is there. So I'm changing this one now. The center mark, I'm not changing this. But center mark would be like that, like a plus inside of the thing. And we no longer need to do those things because we now have in the software an option for center line. So when you put it in center line, it does, once the circle is drawn, just click on this and just click on the circle, it just drop in the center line. So even though this feature exists in the software, we don't even have to use it again because they now have something that makes something life easier for you. But what it essentially was doing is, if you choose the plus, if you choose the center mark and choose mark, it gives you like a plus in the center. And if you choose line, it don't just give you the plus, it give you the plus plus the line. But the center mark thing is doing the same thing. So it doesn't matter whether this is a non-mark or center, because we won't be using that feature. But this is the size of the little plus that would be in the center. So we'll skip that. Come down to here now. I'm going to make this 4. And break, dimension break is saying if I had 2 lines doing this. So you have a line like this, and I have another dimension line running this way. You would have a gap between the two of them. All right. So with this dimension going that way, and another dimension probably cross it like that, or if it even cross the extension line, you would have a gap, and the distance between the gap is what you put it here. But you have to actually use another feature to activate the gap. I don't just know which one to put it on. So when you are doing it, you will decide which of the two should have the gap, the break, whether it's this one or this one. So any of them can have the break. All right. So by virtue of typing a figure here is what it will be when you are doing the dimension. All right. So this over here, again, more mechanical drawing, but I'll just explain quickly. Architectural arc length is if you're doing those dimensions and you have an arc like that. The arc length symbol usually look like this. So if you have a dimension, the arc is there, and the arc length symbol is like a little squiddly looking thing like this. So arc length symbol, what it wants to know is if it should precede the dimension. So you have the arc on your drawing, like you're trying to measure this distance of this arc on here. So this little symbol here, and if you say the distance is 10, then what it wants to know is if the symbol should come in front of the 10 or above it. So the symbol come up here. So, all right, that's what this is talking about. and the jog arc dimension. I don't know if you've ever seen a jog arc dimension, but sometimes you have an arc so wide that the center of it is off the sheet. So you might see something like this. You get an arrow there and the plus for the center. But you know that the center will be way off screen because it's a very big arc. So this is talking about that, the jog arc, right? The angle of it and stuff like that, the little thing here. So but again, this is for more mechanical drawing, and this has to do with the factor of the size of it and all of that. So we're gonna just skip all of that and move to the next tab, which is the text tab, this one. All right, so remember we had created a text style and call it DimT. So this is where we pick it up, DimT. So if you notice, the text actually changed from how it looked before to how it is now, because it's now using the properties of the text style. And then again, we're going to use the text using by layer. So you take on the same properties of the layer. And we're not going to put no fill. If you put a fill, can you imagine you put by layer for this? It will just shade the whole thing. So no fill. That is if you are probably doing the printing the thing in color, you want a nice light background. So you could, have the foreground in red and the background in a light yellow or something like that. But we're going to print everything in one color. And when the blueprint is drawing, it's going to be in one color. So you would end up with a shaded rectangle if you use a fill color. But the text height, we're going to use 3 millimeters. Remember I said my smallest text on paper will be 3. So in the standard, I have 3 here. And I'm not going to scale it up. So this meaning if I put 1 here is 1 times 3. If I put 2 here, it's 2 times 3, so it will be 6. I want to do that. I'm not putting any frame around it either, so no, don't turn that on. Now we want the text to be above the line as it is. If we say below, it goes underneath the line. We don't want that. And if we say center, it's going to chop out the thing and put it. We don't have enough space for that, so we're going to keep it above. And there are others. I won't have time to go into all of them. So you have above. All right. But horizontally, we want it to be centered, because if you choose this one, it is like a left align or a right align. And then you have the option to put it over the line, the extension line. That's why it says over extension line 1 or line 2. So we're just going to keep it centered. So it will remain in the center of between the extension lines. And then now we as western side people, we read from left to right. So we wanted to do that. The Japanese and the Chinese and those guys, they read from right to left, top down. So they would be choosing right to left. So they would be reading from the right of the screen, going down towards the left, where we read from left to right. So our dimensions basically. So the software is made to accommodate them as well. So they will be using that and their characters that they write. The Chinese and the Japanese character, they would do those things. All right, so left to right. And we don't want the text to touch the line. So I'm going to make it about 1 millimeter above the line. If I put it, just to exaggerate so you can understand, 4, click somewhere else, you notice it gone way up in the air from it. See? So the 1 millimeter, when I click here, so you have to click somewhere else to see it update on screen. So we click somewhere else in another field. See it come closer. Now I even want it closer, but the little comma is causing the problem. So we will fix that problem there. Right? It is less, it is more than 1 right now. It is 1 millimeter from the bottom of the comma down to the line. Right? So we're going to do that. Fix that afterwards. Then the text alignment now. This is, right now, it is going along with the dimension line. If I were to choose horizontal, notice even though this is going slant, the text is going horizontal. That will take up a lot of space on your paper. So we're going to choose this one. So it will follow. So even when it going vertical, the text will turn vertical. So it aligns with the dimension line. And this is basically a combination of the two, where you have like those radius dimension, it will do that, but the rest of them remain aligned. On the standard, I have aligned, so I'll just go with align for everything. Okay. Then we move over now to fit. Now this is the one that is doing the scaling, the because if you didn't remember to set the annotation checkbox before so that it works with the annotation scale down here, then this is your chance now to check the box. Right? So this is your last chance. But there's something else I want to go into. Over here, it says for fit option, if there isn't enough room to place both text and arrowheads inside the extension line, the first thing to move outside the extension line is, if I say arrowhead, you might see in the past where persons have a drawing and the arrows doing something like this. The arrows move outside. Oops, wrong way. This way and that way. That means if they were to stay on the inside, then they would be doing something like this. Can you imagine you have the line go across like that? And by the time the arrowheads do that, they start to overlap, like when they're very close. So in such case, what happened? It put them on the outside, right? That's what this feature is doing. But we are going to say whether or not they can go there or fit, put them between, because we're not using architectural tick. We want the text to force, and that would be your dimension now that have the wall thickness, the 150. So it does override the distance. If you look on the drawing, you would notice that where the 150 is, it couldn't really hold between the extension line, but it just write it across it. And that is because this feature is turned on. If you don't do that, it's going to push it on the outside, and then you're going to decide whether it should go to the side of it or above it and stuff like that. So we're going to say, if we choose to, then allow us to put it beside. So we're going to keep this one. If we choose to put it on the outside, let's put it beside, because you have the option to put it over the line or with a leader. I would have to wait until we do the dimension for you to see that. So I'm going to keep it on this. All right. Then no, nothing else over here. So the rest is to leave the annotation thing. And down here, we're not putting in this one. We just leave this one, because if you do that, then every time you put a dimension, you have to manually decide where to place the dimension. We have already told it to put in the center, so we don't need to manually place it after. Now, before the 2008 version of AutoCAD, because remember I told you annotation scale existed since 2008. Persons like me using the software from teaching it from 2002 version, we had to contend with this. So if you turn this off, you're going to notice that this is no functional. So what we had to do before 2008, because this feature wasn't in there, we had to create a dimension style for every scale. So I would not call the dimension style DimStyle. I would have called it Dim50. And then I would have to put 50 here as my overall scale. And then this 50 now would be multiplying the same thing that this 50 is doing. So I would have to put 50 down here. And then when I'm creating another style, I would have to call it Dim20. And then when I get to here, I would put 20 here for it to do what the 1 in 20. But since 2008, we don't have to pay attention to here, because when you turn on annotative, notice it grays out. Right? You can't put nothing in here anymore, because this down here takes over, because it is now annotative. But that's what we had to do back in the days. We have to put the 50 and the 20 and the 10, whatever here, so to do the manual calculation. All right, so we go across now to primary unit. Now the primary unit will be the unit that you're drawing in. I remember we had said it should have been decimal. But you notice I could have drawn in metric, and I could say, you know what, put it in architectural distance. So it actually tell me the distance in imperial, right? So, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let it remain in decimal, which is the unit that was drawn. What you can do is go to alternate unit and let it put the alternate unit underneath, which we'll talk about. But I don't want that. I'm just going to demonstrate it. Now, right now, we have 2 decimal places, and that is why we're seeing 11 after the 14. So it's actually saying 11.1, sorry, 14.11. But because it's using comma, there are some countries in the world like Germany and Finland, they don't use full stop. We use full stop, period. See, move the period, you know, so it comes on a little closer than when it is saying comma, because with the comma, it have to measure that 1 millimeter from the bottom of the comma to the line. I don't want to take up so much space, so I'm going to put on period. Right, there are countries that use space without any dot, but we use period, so we keep it on period. and there are countries that use a comma, which is the same thing, 14.11. So let me use period. But in our case, we don't even want the decimals. So up here, we're going to tell it no decimal place. Meaning, if your building is out by 1 millimeter, you can't throw it out a square. We are drawing in millimeters. So it's okay for me to dimension something. And if it is measuring 13.5 millimeter, I don't have a problem if it says 14, because half a millimeter won't make a big difference. But if I was drawing in meters, then I would have to choose 3 decimal place, because in that case, it would be 14.538. I can't afford for it to say 15 by rounding it up to 15 to the nearest meter if I say no decimal place. So depending on the unit of measurement that you're dimensioning, you're going to have to set the precision. This is not the precision like we did before. That precision that showed up in the units thing had to do with what display on the screen when you hover over a line. This dimension, this precision that we're talking about is what is going to show up beside the dimension. So because we are drawing in millimeter, we can safely say no decimal place. Because if something measure 13.5, so what if it says 14? It's just half a millimeter. My drawing cannot be out by half a millimeter. My building cannot be out by half of millimeter. If one wall is longer than the other wall by 14, by zero point 0.5 millimeter, that's not going to change the whole thing by making it out of square. So we can afford to go no decimal place. All right. So down here, I don't want no prefix, mean that I don't want anything in front of it. There are times when you see like TYP, which means typical in front of it. That's how you get it there. I don't want that. And there are times when you might want to show the unit, so MM, and it shows the measurement after it. Well, we don't even have enough space to display that either. So we're not going to put in any suffix or prefix. What we can do on our sheet, we can just put a statement to say that all dimensions are in millimeter, and that will solve the problem. Okay, so again, I'm not going to put in any factor to scale anything. So down here remains unchanged. We're not going to change anything down here. Let's talk briefly about this alternate units. Alternate units now is if you want your drawing to show the metric measurement and the imperial underneath it. So you would have to first, I'm going to turn it off. I'm just demonstrating, but I don't want it. You notice in the handout, I put optional, but I don't want it at all. So what you would have to first do is to check this box to display it first of all. And then now, you'd have to say, you know what? You don't want it beside it. So down here, you would say put it below it. But so this is if you want it after it, which means beside, but this is below it. Let me jump back up here. You cannot use your alternate unit and your primary unit to be the same. So it can't be decimal. So in this case now, you'll be choosing architectural. Right? So it will put the imperial measurement underneath and the other. And then you would decide how you want to round off the imperial. So of course you wouldn't want to go to the nearest inch. So if something measure half inch, you're going to say 1 inch. And half inch is about approximately 12 millimeters, a whole heap of things out. So you might want to stick to about like 1/16, which is close to 1 millimeter. That's how much you get, right? And then now, what this is doing, this is multiplier. This is basically saying 1 divided by 25. That's how they get this figure, 1 divided by 25. Now, we are not even using 25.4. Sorry, this is 1 divided by 25.4. But we are not using 25.4. We are using 25. So that means our factor is not 0.0393 whatever. Because we're not using 25.4. We are using 25. So we would have to use 0.04, which is 1 divided by 25. So what this does, if a measurement is 150 for your block wall, it will automatically multiply the 150 by 0.04, and below it, it will be 6, because 0.04 times 150 equals 6. So that's how it will know that the measurement is 6 inches. And it does the same thing for all the measurements, and it put the measurements underneath them in imperial. But I'm not going to keep it. I'm just showing you how it works. When you're doing your personal drawing, you do that. Once you're giving me an assignment or a final project, I don't want that. So we just turn it off. As a matter of fact, Parish Council will take your drawing if it is in metric only. The persons who still need to use this is because they're drawing in imperial, and they know the Parish Council will not take the drawing if it is in imperial only. So what they do is to show their alternate drawing as metric, because Parish Council will not accept it if it doesn't have metric drawing on it. We are drawing in metric, so we don't have a problem. We don't have to put no imperial. So we click OK. Now we're not going to use tolerance. Tolerance is more for mechanical drawing, so I'm not going to go into that at all. So basically, when you're setting up your dimension style, you need to go as far as from lines to primary unit, no further, right? So we finished the dimension style. Click OK. So clearly you can see that we currently have two dimension styles that are annotated. These are the ones that were there before, ISO 251 standard. So it's set current because anything you create last, set current. So we don't have to double click on it or click on this because it was the last one that was created. Now let me test it out to show you how it works. I'm going to close that dialog box. Now when we go to the annotate tab on our ribbon and go to dimension panel and choose linear, right? Can notice our dimension style is set current called DimStyle. So the other dimension styles here, ISO 25, annotative, and standard. We're going to start with ours, which is DimStyle. So when I choose linear this time and click here to dimension from this point to that point, I want the distance, and then pull out. You see how everything display nice and clean because they are now 50 times bigger than they were created. When we say, so let me just click somewhere just for argument's sake. Because by right, we want it to be 12 millimeter away on paper, which is 600 on screen. Now, the problem is when you pull away and type 600, 600, and press enter, it is not 600. Let's check it. DI, let's dimension from endpoint to here. See there? 500 and something. And you can try it all 100 times. You might barely get it one time. So that's a problem in the software again. We checked in 2021 to see they solve that. See there? If I click and click here and pull out even further and say somebody say, oh, maybe you never pull far enough. All right. So I pull and type 600 and press enter. It end up somewhere different. So that's like a fight. You'll never get it right. So my solution is instead of doing that, what I do is just offset this line, the distance away, and just use it as a work in progress tool. So if I offset this line 600, then I can just pull and snap to it. So I'm going to offset it in a different layer though. I don't want it I'm going to offset it in this layer. I don't want it in the dimension layer because I want it to erase it easily afterwards. So what I will do is just set my zero layer current and offset it in zero layer. So I can just easily freeze everything and just delete all of them one time. So I'm going to set my zero layer current, right? And then I'm going to do the offset. So O enter, L enter, C for current enter, and the distance is 600, enter. So when I offset this line, 600. You only need to do it one for each wall. So 600, 600. One for each wall, 600. And I call that your starter dimension. And 600 and 600. So we just offset for each of them so that we can accurately do it. So let me just do this one quickly because we only have 3 minutes to end of time. I'm just going to demonstrate line 1, 2, and 3, and then next week I can refine it if you miss it. So we click on annotate again, because we have to set back our dimension layer current, dimension layer, and make sure it's at 1 in 50 because it's annotative. And we go to annotate, linear. We're going to pick from where we want the dimension to where we want the dimension, and then we click endpoint. We can guarantee that that's now 600. All right, so that's how you do it. Afterwards, we can just freeze all the layers and just go back and erase the zero layer. So it's easy to erase the line even though it overlaps. So we won't forget. To get the rest of them going, we have no intention to pick, and pull out. That's waste of time. So you just click on the existing dimension, hover over this to pick up from where it was, and choose the option that says continue. And look what happened. Just pick up from where. So we just need to click here and move on and pick here endpoint. One of the easiest things that I would normally recommend to the students is to turn off the windows and door layer so that we don't get mixed up to know where to pick. So I'm going to turn off the window layer, so the light bulb there, and turn off the door layer, window and door layer. So notice they're gone. So when it's time to dimension now, I can just easily find the endpoint. So I just click, hover, continue, endpoint, because remember that line one dimension, we're measuring in between our openings as well as the openings. Masonry dimensions, we call them. So we just keep clicking endpoint, going down, endpoint, endpoint, and done. Same principle for the next wall. You do the same thing. You would just pick um, baseline, linear again. I'm racing with time because it was a minute and a half. So endpoint to endpoint, and then you would pull out endpoint. And you click on this one as if you're going to continue in it. There are icons for this, but this is more efficient. So we go here, continue dimension, and we will pick endpoint there and endpoint. So I'll just do two walls and then escape. To get to the next row now, simple. You click on it again, hover over a second point, the second grip, and then you would choose baseline. Remember we said baseline should be 12. So notice it automatically just jump up the 12 millimeter and then it jump up again. So we can just use this one to our advantage for the overall dimension. And then we don't want a fourth line to escape. And then how do we continue? We just do the same thing. Click here and continue. So in our next class, I will go over just this to recap. So continue, and then you would pick for the room dimension, and then the wall thickness, and then the room dimension again, and then the wall thickness again, and the room, and it complete one wall. Next class, I'll come back and tell you how to get rid of these lines overlapping. It's a feature that I told you to ignore that is causing it. So I'm not even going to, what I'll do, I'll just leave it like this, but I will